Hey, it's Anthony here, and welcome to another episode of the Grow My Salon Business Podcast. And whether this is your first time or perhaps you are a regular listener, either way, thank you for tuning in today. Today's episode is a follow-on from a previous one that went out in June. In episode 301, I spoke with salon owner Luke Reynolds about some interesting personal development team activities that he'd integrated into his business. Today, I'm joined once more by Luke because 14 months ago, he took a big leap that many salon owners dream about when he expanded from a small salon space into a beautifully designed, much larger salon. In this episode, we talk through the real journey, what drove the decision, the investment, managing the budget, the challenges, the wins, and the lessons that he's learned along the way. So if you've ever asked yourself, how will I know when I'm ready to grow? Well, this one's for you. So without further ado, welcome back to the show, Luke Reynolds.
Hey, Anthony. Thank you so much for having me back. I really appreciate it. It's really good to be back.
No, it's really good to have this opportunity because on our last podcast, we really spoke pretty much exclusively about the culture that you had in the salon. And we got a lot of great feedback on that. I know that I said to you at the end of that episode that I really wanted to get you back to talk about the salon itself because that's how we first met, that you were, moving salon and you'd opened up or were in the process of opening up this fantastic new salon. And so I think there's a lot to talk about there that will, take up a whole podcast. So I'm glad we were able to sort of separate it. So let's start with that there. And let me ask you this question at the beginning. Was opening this fantastic salon, was that part of a sort of a dream you had? Was it part of the sort of big picture? Was it always on the plan? Or was it just sort of one of those things that sometimes happen where an opportunity presents itself and you decide to go for it?
I think in the latter years, it definitely more and more became a dream. We were in the old space for 17 and a half years, which is a long time. So for the first part or majority of that, I was happy there. But I think then as the business started to grow and get busier and staff weren't leaving and we didn't really have much space, it then became a little bit more of, a natural progression type scenario. And of course, like anything in life, when you want something or you want something to happen or you're planning for it, it then becomes almost impossible to find the right space, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And so that dragged on for a while, but there was obviously lots of planning in the latter years, in the couple of years leading up to the move, and lots of stressful moments with trying to find the right location and those sorts of things. It'd be hard to give you a timeline, but it's a significant amount of years ago, it did become a bit more of a dream to have a much bigger, more beautiful, more functional space to work out of.
Yeah. Funnily enough, I had an email from a young man just recently, a week or so ago maybe, and he was working for someone else, and he wasn't even in Australia where you're based, but he wanted to open his own salon, and he was asking me, how do you know when you're ready to open a salon? And I eventually got back to him, and I gave him a bit of advice about that. But one of the things that really stuck with me that I said to him, which I hadn't thought that much about myself, was to open a small space to begin with. Do not try and go too big because you don't know what you're doing. You don't know how to run a business, build a business, manage people. You don't know how to do all that stuff. So to lessen your exposure, go small. Open a salon with, 3 or 4 chairs, maybe you and 1 or 2 other people, and then you'll get the hang of running a business, building a business, what it means to be a business owner, and then you'll be ready to expand when the opportunity presents itself. So I know that your first salon was very small. I know that, as you just alluded to, that you were falling over each other and you sort of, half jokingly just said, and the staff wouldn't leave. I mean, that's a good problem to have, isn't it? But what made you feel it was, the right time? Because you probably thought, like I did with the advice that I'd given that young guy, that at some point when you opened your first salon, you thought, I'm going to go small. So is that what it was, that you were literally bursting at the seams, that people wouldn't leave, staff and or clients, and you were sort of thinking, I've got to go bigger, I'm now ready for it?
Yes. First of all, great advice that you gave that young man. I couldn't agree with it more. I think it's very tricky. Being hairdressers, there's no business school that's part of college. And believe me, there's been lots of very hard lessons learned over the last 18 years. But yes, we were literally falling over each other. So just to give, I guess, a bit of understanding to the situation, the old salon was 50 square meters.
Okay.
It's pretty small. It's
Yeah.
probably,
How
smaller.
many chairs?
Yeah, and that's the funny thing. It was a long, narrow space, a long, narrow rectangle, and we actually had 9 chairs and 3 basins in it,
Oh,
which
okay.
was remarkable
Yeah.
for the actual size of it.
Yeah.
But what it did lack was staff room, our own toilet or bathroom, all of those sorts of things. The basins were kind of at the end of the room in the middle of the salon. And don't get me wrong, it was a beautiful little space and served me so well. I'm extremely thankful for what that space gave us over the years. But yeah, it just got to a point where I couldn't fit any more staff in, one. And two, I wanted more from the business. Personally and professionally, I wanted more. I was ready for the next challenge, the next phase, which is what you and I have been working on together over the last 12 months. And it was probably more about that as well as space. So it was those sort of two things combined. And that, in that space, I had kind of reached the ceiling. I couldn't go any further there. I couldn't put on any more staff. I couldn't fit any more staff. I couldn't, and then attracting more staff from there was problematic. Well, one, I couldn't fit them in, but two, it was such a small space, and there was one or two occasions where we had interviewed or had been in conversations with a couple of big stylists that had moved over from overseas and had been working in much bigger salons, and they're like, oh God, I don't know if I could work in a tiny little boutique space like that. I don't know if that's for me.
Yeah. Okay.
To us, it was normal, right? Because we'd been there for so long.
Yeah.
Creates a really good vibe. The energy's on all the time. It's like a small space of any sort, whether it be a restaurant or a cafe or a bar or whatever. If you've got a smaller space, it's much easier to create that beautiful energy and that beautiful vibe.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Well, I remember when you contacted me the first time, we had a conversation over Zoom about it. And you said to me that you told me you were going to open the new salon. You were it was already in process, like the building work hadn't started or anything, but you were seriously committed to it. You'd signed leases and all that. When you contacted me, you said something which I thought was really interesting. You said, I just want to make sure that I haven't forgotten anything. And I just remember thinking at the time, that's quite an unusual thing that people say to me when, they contact me about, working together in some context. And as it turns out, you hadn't forgotten anything. Well, I don't think you had. You were.
I was more just really petrified and needed someone to lean on.
You were so well organised and prepared for the next step. And over the last year or so of us working together, you're very well organised with everything that you do. But I want you to talk about that planning and organisation phase, and how, important that was to you to get that right, because you seriously got it right. You obviously invested a lot of time into it. But yeah, just talk to us about that for a minute.
Sure. As I mentioned briefly before, we had a couple of false starts. So it was over the period of maybe 2 to 3 years. We had gone through the process of almost getting to to signing a lease on 2 other locations. And at the last minute, for whatever reason, they fell through. Which in hindsight, I am now very grateful for. But at the time, obviously, it was a bit of a hard situation. So there was a lot of time that had gone into the planning. And then I had a really brilliant, very highly skilled and very experienced architect who's also a really good friend and client, a very long-term client of the Salon, who's very highly awarded and had said yes to designing the salon for me. And so I had her to lean on as well. So Rowena has done such an amazing job. And I had her to lean on. So from a design point of view, I was very lucky because Rowena had been such a long-standing client. She had experienced the salon for many years. She knew exactly what I wanted. She knew my aesthetic. She knew the vibe, all of those. And literally my brief to her was just recreate what we have into a much larger space.
Okay.
Whatever that
All right.
space ends up being. So that was a very easy brief for me. And as far as the design point of it was concerned, it was pretty hands off for me. Other than I had I already had made decisions in my mind of the specific salon furniture that I wanted, which was all Mileti. So obviously we had to deal with timelines of getting stuff, bespoke made and imported from Italy and those sorts of things. But I guess having been in the salon business for so many years, I thought I kind of was across it, but you just never know. And even though I had 17 and a half years of experience in the business in that space, I knew that there was going to be an unknown, and I knew I was stepping into possibly one of the biggest challenges of my life. That was also an exciting challenge, not a negative challenge. But I just had that feeling of, sometimes when you're going away for the weekend and you packed your bag and then you go to walk out the door and you go to walk to and you're like, you just get that feeling of like, have I got my shit together? What's going on? So I guess it was more that. And also to not having any business partners or at this point in life, a personal partner or anything. It was just me, and I felt like I was flying really solo. And that may sound funny to some people when I've got such an amazing big team, but there's only certain things you can involve, certain people in when it comes to that level of planning around something so big.
Well, one of the things I wanted to touch on with you is that, were you in the old salon 17 and a half years?
Yes.
Right. Okay. So, and you've talked a little bit about that and some of the frustrations with it, and also some of the benefits of being in a smaller salon. What I wanted to ask you about is that when you get the opportunity to open a second salon with all the wisdom and a bigger budget behind you, were there any specific things that you'd learnt, past experience that you really wanted to make sure you didn't make the same mistake or have the same problem in the new space? Was there, because it was an opportunity to sort of change things up. Was there any one particular thing? An obvious one is I just want people to have more room and not be tripping over each other. But, was there anything particular that you thought, I'm so glad to have this opportunity to address X?
Yeah, not really. I don't think there was any X factor for me other than I just wanted to provide a beautiful big new space for my team to grow and flourish in, and to be able to attract new team members and to have space so we're not on top of each other. And I wanted to have all the bells and whistles because everything, this tiny space we're in, like I said, there was no staff room. We didn't have our own bathroom facilities, and we were sharing with a restaurant next door. So for me, it was kind of more having a family, having a 6-people family in a 2-bedroom unit kind of scenario, and just wanting to get that nice big family home that, we all could actually fit in. And kind of almost in a way, become a bit more legit. It was more that the sense of growth and outgrowing the space.
So those two things you just mentioned, they're really important, aren't they? The break room, laundry, dispensary, whatever it was. I mean, they were some of the things that you really wanted to address there. Yeah. Okay, let's talk about the budget without having to talk about the specific budget, but budgets in general. Obviously, there's been a big budget here, significant amount of money has gone into it. How did that work for you? Did you sort of set a budget, i.e., say I've got X dollars to work and I've got to make it happen within that, or was it the other way around that you had this vision and then you thought I'm going to find the budget to make it work, and you being a bit of a what's the word?
Perfectionist.
Perfectionist. I was trying to, that'll do us perfectly. Okay. That sometimes when you're a perfectionist, it's easy for looking at the budget for the budget to get stretched and stretched and stretched and stretched. And the end result, you go way over budget. So talk to us a little bit about the budget and how you managed it and what the sort of end result was with that sort of stuff.
There were definitely a few challenges around that. Initially there was no budget. It was more I worked the other way around, like the ladder that you just explained. So I kind of was like, this is the vision, this is what we want, this is the size, this is the amount of chairs from an operational point of view that I'd worked out and kind of worked backwards. Mm-hmm. And then from that point, I basically just tried to get out of it as cheaply as possible, the least amount of damage possible to obtain what we wanted. So the first challenge, the furniture and all of that sort of stuff was pretty easy because that was a package price that was coming out of Italy from Miletti. So that was kind of done and that was separate to the build. And then I worked working with Rowena, that was a set price. And then basically, obviously I had never done it before, but the way that it works is that the architect designs it and they put together a design package. And then they essentially go to market with that. It's called a tender package. And so then they send the tender package that they've created out to, say, 5 builders. And then basically those 5 builders, we had certain builders that we wanted to work with. And then those builders basically come in and they pitch for the work, who wants to do the work. And then we start talking budget with them. And then we kind of we picked the top couple that we wanted to work with. And luckily one of the companies, which was our top pick to work with, were one of the cheapest quotes. And I mean, those quotes, they differed by I think between the cheapest and the most expensive, I think the difference was about $400,000,
wow.
A lot of money.
Yeah. Okay.
So we did that, and then we went through an engineering process. So we went to market with the dream vision or the dream version.
When you say we, you mean you and the architect. So she was helping you on choosing the builder for the job. Yeah. Right. Okay. Yeah. And $400,000 difference between the cheapest and the most expensive. I mean, that is a huge variation. So okay.
We pitched to 5 building companies.
Okay.
And I'm sure just like the rest of the world, since COVID, building costs and construction costs have just gone through the roof. So what we had initially spoken about with Rowena, with the in saying, it should be roughly around, it ended up being almost double that. So,
wow. Okay.
So then what we did once we got the building, we selected the building company we wanted to work with. We then brought them to the table and we sat down and we went, right, okay, this is how much we want to spend, or this is how much, where your quote's here and we want to be here, and just, I guess, like you would in any negotiative situation. And then that came in at a certain price, and then Rowena and I went through and did a little bit of a cost engineering scenario where we went through the salon and we went, right, do we really need that cabinetry there? Do we really need, that cupboard there, or things like that? There was a detail on the mirrors that was supposed to be made out of folded brass, so we engineered that back to a painted 2-pack, and just things like that, and materials and things like that, where no one would know any different other than I. And she was because at the point, at the time, I was like, no, I just love it the way it is. I don't want to, I don't want to lose anything. But she's like, you and I are the only 2 people in the world that will notice the difference. Those kind of things where you can go, the level of, like, if you're building a house or an apartment or doing a renovation of anything, whether you can go and select super high end finishes, metals and stones, and the same kind of, architectural piece might be a huge variance in price depending on what materials you've used.
Yeah. So a little bit of compromising as you go. I'm surprised to hear that you said you didn't actually have a budget at the beginning.
Yeah,
I was gonna say how very hairdresser of you,
yeah,
because
yeah.
because you wouldn't be the first one that's done
Or
that.
just how Luke of you.
Yeah. Well, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, budget. What budget? No,
Yeah, budgets are not really my thing or friend.
yeah. I mean, we
Unfortunately.
spoke about that a few times, and I always thought you were very sensible and controlled about it. So, that
Yeah.
you made
Well, I am.
good
Like when I said
decisions.
there was no budget, it's like I was never going to go and spend millions of dollars.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Came down to Rowena had given me an equation of like, it should be, the quotes that they work on from a build perspective, well, I can't remember now, but like say, for example, it's $3,500 per square meter. Well,
Yeah.
great. And you times that by the square meterage and you go, okay, so, that's roughly, what it should be, but that got blown out of the water by the changing construction costs and things like that.
Yeah, I think that definitely caught a lot of people out. Okay. I remember you sent me photographs like, we've taken possession today. Here's a photograph of it. And it was just concrete floors, concrete walls, all exposed wiring and ventilation ducts. And you said something like, we're meant to be in 3 weeks or something. And I was like, good luck with that. And then you were sending me picture updates every 2 or 3 days.
Yeah.
And it was amazing how quick the whole thing came together. Were there any big, again, I was, thinking that's how well organized you were. So, I mean, it sounds like, although you're sort of laughing about it in some areas, obviously you, Rowena, the construction company, it was a very well managed project because it looked great and it all came together in record time. Were there any big challenges that you had to, to sort of address during that build?
Absolutely none. It was amazing. The build was done in 8 weeks from scratch to finished product.
Yeah.
The furniture arrived like basically right on time. We're very lucky, touch wood. We had a very experienced, very brilliant project management company and commercial fit out company. If anything, right at the start, I was probably a little bit like you when Rowena and when they said, "Oh yeah, we'll get it done in 8 weeks," I was just like, "What?" But yeah, so it was remarkable. And that was probably the most exciting part. Going down, sometimes I'd drive down during the day if I had a spare 5 minutes and just have a little peekaboo. I'm sure the builders on site got really sick of me just kept popping in. It was, that was for me was the really exciting part, was watching it come to life and watching that whole process of like walking in going, how on earth is this gonna, and then as it came together, because you'd only seen it on plans, to watch it come together in real life, that was really it was very special.
For our audience, we don't yet, as I'm recording this, we don't yet have a blog on Grow My Salon Business website, but we are about to start a blog and we'll feature all of Luke's salon images on that blog. So you'll be able to check that out and see what it looks like. Okay, so then you closed down one and you moved into the other. And again, that seemed to go pretty smoothly. Yeah. I can remember on our calls, one of the things that I said to you was that, as a salon business grows, because you went from 9 chairs, which was not as small as what I thought it was. I didn't realize it had 9 chairs in it, but you went from a much smaller space into a bigger space with more staff, more team members, etc. And I remember saying to you that be prepared for things to break, not physical, bits and pieces to break, but the systems that you have when you have a smaller salon in one location, that you spend a lot of time developing and putting in place, don't necessarily work as the business grows. So now you're in a bigger location and you've got more staff and, just physically you're in a different location. And so some of the systems that you might have had that worked in the smaller salon no longer worked in the bigger salon. What did expansion cause to break, so to speak, in your business as far as systems, relationships, just how the place ran?
I think quite a few things. I mean, nothing major. I think we have had for many years great systems in place. I've got a fantastic manager who's very conscientious and kind of across most things. But like now that we're in the bigger space, it's almost like every day. We've been in the new space for a year now. And most days we are constantly chatting, going, okay, is this working? Is it not working? Does this need work? So lots of little systems and processes, obviously, that just come with having a larger team and more people, more moving parts. So and a much bigger space. Say for example, like deliveries come in, or new clients, or no matter what it is, it's kind of the traffic. The huge difference in traffic that's coming in and out of the salon. We've noticed that we have needed to put in systems and a lot more communication around, what happens with that when it comes in and goes out and those sorts of things. Traffic and those sorts of things. And then just, people management has obviously become a much bigger system and needs a lot more work. But obviously we're across that, and that's kind of what we touched on in our last podcast. But as far as we're always playing with new things now because we are growing, and we've now got a salon coordinator as well as the manager. So there's two of them plus me. I'm on the floor full time. So they're playing around with consultation cards and trying to assist. We've got quite a young team, or a large number of young teams where, I have anywhere up to kind of 5-6 apprentices at a time. So we've got a couple qualifying every year. So they're coming on the floor and, they struggle with, consultation, recommending retail and treatments, and having that confidence, which I know we touched on in last podcast. I won't go into too much, but just systems around how we can help them and make it easier for them to manage that process and to have the confidence to recommend an upsell and do it, all of those sorts of things. And then that can also then get communicated back to reception so that client's charged appropriately. As little as that, those are more the things, and the systems now that are like, it's not that easy to keep track of everything now. So in place for that. Some of the other challenges have definitely been having a bigger team, online booking, client expectations. We've noticed that we're so busy, and we're so much more visual now. Like, we're on a main high street, on a corner, standalone building. The fit out looks amazing. So people, are coming in off the street, they're booking online. We've got a much higher volume of traffic. So managing traffic flow, managing client expectations, clients are booking. We found we had, there for a while, this huge influx of new clients, and particularly a younger clientele that were booking for something online. And then they'd come in, and then the amount of time allocated for the service that they'd booked online, for example, they'll book for a tint retouch or part line or something online, but then they'll come in and they'll need a full color correction or or something, and then you've got to explain to them, well, I'm really sorry, you haven't booked that in. Or people, all of these, a similar kind of client booking through Instagram, and then asking for a rough price guide, but then they're taking that as a quote, and then they come in and then they're like, oh no, I was told a full head of foils and a treatment and a haircut was going to be, $250. And we're like, no, sorry.
Right. So in the old salon, you didn't have online booking?
We did, but we just didn't seem to have, I think because it was much smaller.
It's more about the volume. Yeah.
Pretty much every online booking, unless it was a repeat client or a client that we had the history of or things like that, Rachel would ring them and go, okay, you've booked online. Obviously, I just want to confirm what you've booked for and what you actually want. But now with the volume of clients, the reception don't really have time to be doing that. And also it kind of counteracts or It's kind of, the opposite to the idea of online booking, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
Just creating more work. But so yeah, they're the kind of things. I mean, there's been nothing major. We've had a couple of team members. We've had a little bit of turnover with team just because they've found the bigger new work environment a little bit overwhelming because it's a much bigger, busier space.
Yeah, well, I was going to ask you about that. Yeah.
Yeah, I still think it's a great vibe.
Yeah.
I don't feel that there's that much of a difference that it's like completely,
Yeah.
But
I often talk about, and we've spoken about this as well. I often talk about how the salon business model that has been in existence for a long time, Americans usually refer to it as a commission-based business model. You don't so much use that term in Australia. You'll use the term more that it's just an employee-based salon, employee-employer-based relationship. And over the last 20 years in the US and more recently in Australia, the UK, the rest of the world, there's been a real drive towards more independent, solo business unit of one working arrangement. And what I've been saying a lot on the podcast for, regular listeners will know I talk about this, where it's not just about the fact that there is a new business model for people to embrace, that there's another option, because we've got technology, i.e. smartphones, etc. today, where you can book online and do all your marketing online. You've got social media, you've got all these things that didn't exist 20 years ago, but they do exist now. And so they make it possible for a new generation to really embrace this self-employment idea. And for a lot of people, it's a good thing. For a lot of people, it's not a good thing. But part and parcel of that discussion is that I always talk about how, that existing salon owners of the commission-based business model, the employee-employer-based business model, need to change what they represent, because the salon of 20 years ago and the salon of today are two different things. And if you try and run a business today and, recruit and train and motivate and have the culture that you had 20 years ago today, it doesn't work. And so where I'm going with this is that I'm always saying to people that you need to reinvent the employee-employer-based business model, the commission-based business model, because if it is to compete against self-employed, it needs reinventing. Otherwise, you're on a hiding to nowhere. I hope I've made that clear with the way I've said that. It sounded a bit jumbled up to me. But yeah, so I want you to talk about that and how did that sort of play into, and I know this sort of crosses into our last podcast a little bit as well, but how does that play into your thinking about this amazing looking salon and, the budget that you've spent on it and the culture you've created? How did that influence your thinking?
Sure. Firstly, I couldn't agree with you more. And I think I definitely agree it's something that needs to change. And I think just for me, growing up, being a hairdresser many years ago, not getting paid well, all of those sorts of things, I guess I kind of got to a point where I'm like, I don't want to be that kind of boss. I want to share more with my team. And I do that through team culture, everything we discussed in the last podcast, team culture, support, a beautiful space to work in, a fun environment to work in, a family-like culture, as well as paying them well. And I couldn't think of anything worse than being in a room working solo by myself, just on a client. That literally is my worst nightmare. And I think, I'm not sure how so many hairdressers do it. And I'm assuming, I can only assume that most of them are doing it for the money. So let's have a conversation about how we can change that and get people back in salon. I've had quite a few of them over the last couple of years that were working under that model come back to work for us because they were missing a team. They were missing community. They didn't have the ability, or know-how to run a business. And they also learnt that they were probably able to earn close to, if not as much as what they would in that other model with our remuneration structure.
Mm.
So look, I think it's pretty simple. I think in this day and age, hairdressing, like, let's not beat around the bush. It's hard work. You're on your feet all day. You're communicating and talking all day. It's busy. Hairdressers work really hard. And so I think salon owners and business owners, instead of whinging about losing staff to renter chairs, I think you need to have a think or a conversation around how can I remunerate them better? How can I look after my staff better so that there isn't that huge imbalance in what they can earn working for themselves? Like, if you think and this is an exercise I've gone through, but obviously I don't have any particular stats. But like, if someone's a single operator, there's only so many clients, unless they're working ridiculously long hours, which that's another downfall. If they're doing all of their backup themselves, there's no apprentices looking after them. There's only so many clients they can see a day. And through being a salon owner, I know that that's not going to earn them a huge amount of money per week. Mm. So let's kind of work back from there and go, okay, well, so then if I pay them a really decent salary, so all of my staff, all of my senior staff, all my full-time senior staff are on really decent salaries.
So when you say salary, though, do you mean decent commission structure or a salary?
No, decent salary. So their base salary.
Yeah.
So will be, it ranges depending on the level of experience or, how long they've been hairdressing. But basically they all range from sort of 65,000 up to 80. I've got some seniors on 85,000 base. Mm. That's not including superannuation. Mm. That's just their base salary. Yeah. And then I have a commission structure that I've taken away all of the tiers. I've taken away all of the multi-achievement factors. So some people have, you've got to do this many treatments and you've got to do this many, sell this much retail, and your percentage rebooking's got to be this much, and all of those sorts of things. So all of those things we talk about on a weekly meeting in our team meeting, and the whole salon has a quota for those. Then all of the individual senior stylists have just one target, and that's a KPI that is 3 times their base salary plus superannuation.
For our non-Australian audience, superannuation is a pension fund in Australia. Yeah. The rest of the world don't call it that. Americans will call it a 401k or an IRA, maybe. In the UK, they'll call it a pension. So just so everyone's clear about what that word is.
Okay. So no worries. So here in Australia, that's 12%. So that's 12% on top of their salary.
Yeah.
So you take that whole figure, times it by 3, and that's basically what it costs you to house or to have that senior stylist before you start making money. And then everything they make over that amount, they take home 25% of every week.
There's one thing though that, and I love what you've said, but there's one thing that no one says. I say it, and so I'm going to say it again. and that is that it's not just like that you pay them well, it's that they produce well.
Yes,
and
totally.
They produce a lot of money. Like I used to say to my staff, I want my staff to be the highest paid hairdressers in the city. And at the same time, I would then say, and I want you to be the most productive hairdressers in the city. And this goes back into what we were just talking about with people working as independents or as employees. When you build a business like yours, the sheer amount of money that is put into it creates a working environment. It creates services, it creates a culture, it creates a client experience that you just don't have as a chair renter, a booth renter, a business unit of one and a little square box. You just don't have it. And so because you have it, you can charge a lot more. So whereas, one of your team, let's say, I don't know, what does a senior stylist charge for a haircut in your salon?
We've got a couple of tiers, but it runs from the cheapest is $135 up to $265, which is
right. So that's a really good example. You can charge that in that environment. If you're self-employed, working in a little studio by yourself, most people would not be able to substantiate why they're charging that sort of price. And that is the difference, isn't it? It's like you will make more money because you will generate more money working in a great business that is well put together, that has all the other bits and pieces of this that you're talking about. And I think that's, that's the sort of bit that we don't talk about enough. Let me just ask you about the clients. Moving from the old salon to the new salon, obviously they knew about it, in advance, etc. Has it changed the way clients perceive your brand or the type of client that you attract?
Yes, I think so. I think we get a lot of comments about how flash the salon is, and oh my God, and oh wow, and those sorts of things. And we've had such a huge influx of new clients that, I guess it's changed a little bit. I guess the age bracket and the dynamic hasn't really changed that much. But we've got a much bigger team. We also have a much bigger variance in age range within the team. So that as well, changes a few things and changes the dynamic a little with the clients. But yeah, no, I don't think there's been a huge amount of change. Obviously, clients love it and it's a lot more comfortable and everything, for example, the basins are much more comfortable and they're in their own separate dark room and, things like that. So it's a much more luxurious experience. So the whole experience has been truly elevated. So there's mention of that and that they love that.
Okay. One thing I wanted to ask you about was the advice you'd give to someone who was in your shoes a couple of years ago. So in other words, you're not in the new salon and you're sort of umming and ahhing about it. You're thinking, gosh, this place is small. We're bursting at the seams. I need to do something about it. What advice would you say to them that they really need to get clear on first? What is it, if you're thinking of doing this, because it's a big financial investment as well as a bigger space, what would you say to them that they need to really get clear on before they go and spend any money or, take that next step?
Oh, it's a tough one. There's so many different little things. Obviously, preparation and being prepared, making sure that you choose the right location. One thing on that's just popped into my mind is for years and years and years, over the years or the time period of having the salon where it was, I'd got approached several different times by specific landlords wanting me to go to specific places and those sorts of things, which in my mind, I was like, yeah, there's no parking, but it's on a high street, but, all of those sorts of things. And my attitude was always, well, our business survives on rebooking. We've got a very high rebooking rate. We're a destination. We don't need walk by trade. I was completely wrong in that, and I'm happy to admit it. It was one of the lessons that I've learned moving there, that I'm just like, wow, the advantage of visibility is amazing.
Are you more visible now or less visible?
Oh, yeah, we were on a side street before, and now we're on a high street on a corner. So we've got huge visibility. We're in a very busy area. We've got unlimited parking, which is one of the things that attracted me to the space. It's a great spot, like amazing spot. So, trying to get the best piece of real estate that you can get or afford or whatever that may be, location. And, they always say that when in residential as well. The other thing that I would have loved pre-warning on, which I didn't get from anyone or didn't even know existed, was the growing pains of cash flow. So really good clarity around cash flow projection. I know, Anthony, your cash flow projection chart is probably one of the most incredible things I've ever seen. For any of you listeners who haven't done any work with Anthony or don't have it, when I first started working with him and Melinda, he's got a couple of really magical Excel spreadsheets which really blew me away. But yeah, just getting into a new space and having make sure you keep some cash in surplus behind you, because once you get in, your expenses go through the roof. So rent, quadruples or whatever it does. You need more stock, you've got more staff. And I think the biggest challenge for me, or one of the most stressful times, was the first 6 months when we moved in, where I still had the same size team, And we were obviously on a recruitment drive, but we had the same size team as we did in the old Salon. So we were obviously still making the same amount of money that we were in the old space, but I also had the expenses of the new space and fit out and a mountain of bills to deal with. And then, all of the unexpected costs, that come with doing something like that you don't take into consideration because you forgot or you weren't aware you had to pay for something, or, legal bills, all sorts of things that just pop up that don't necessarily come into that sphere of planning. I would say go for it. It's been possibly one of the most challenging parts of my life. I don't think I've ever been so stressed in my entire life. And I know, Anthony, you've got the brunt of that a couple of times. But it's also very rewarding, and you walk away and just go, oh wow, like now I'm turning up to work every morning, I kind of walk into the space just pinching myself going, wow, is this real? So that's really nice. And the growth that we've had in both team and with the business since we've been there has been astronomical. It kind of just
well, that's ultimately the thing, because when you and I were talking before you'd moved, it was like, my God, I've gone out on the limb here. This was a lot of money at stake. And obviously you start to think, is this gonna work? Now, and here we are, you've now been in there just over a year. I know you won't mind me saying that you're at least 50% up on where you were before. And you'll comfortably get to 100%. You'll double it quite easily. So the bottom line is it all worth it? Your answer would be what?
Yes. There's still moments and days where, there's challenges. I think, being in a much bigger space and having a bigger team, there's a lot more pressure.
Sure.
That's something that I didn't really, I wasn't really expecting, but the pressure of having to perform versus having great growth, great organic growth in a smaller space with lower overheads, that's something that's been a really big challenge for me. Because obviously we were a very profitable, high-earning business in a very inexpensive location as far as shop rent expenses were concerned. And so now we've moved into the beautiful big Salon, and, the expenses are real. They're much bigger. They're every month. So having to growing the team and working with those challenges is definitely a stressful thing, but it's always in the right direction. We're up 75% on the business, doubled the team. We've grown our color business by 600%. Like there's been some really remarkable figures.
Huge.
Some great growth, but it needs to be there. And in the first couple of years of moving a business or growing a business, and may I even say starting a business, because to be honest with you, that's almost what it feels like. It has felt like almost starting all over again. It feels like it's a new business, not a progression of another business. That's been one of the big challenges for me.
I think one thing that you have sort of glossed over, which is a strength to have of yours, which is recognizing the value in other people. You touched on Rachel, your manager, who, I've never met, but we've talked about her a lot, and she is a fantastic manager, fantastic support for you, and you recognize the value of having that person. I know that you were working with a bookkeeper for a while, who was really digging into the numbers with you and alongside the stuff I was doing with you. And in our last podcast, we spoke about, the people that you were working with to help coach your team. So I think that is one of the secrets of growth as well, is recognizing that, I can't do everything here. I need to make sure that I get some support and that I have some key people in other roles. And I think you've been very good at being objective about that and anticipating it before you needed it, and not being afraid to make those decisions and spend the money where you needed to have those people in place so that the business can grow. Because, otherwise, no matter how pretty it is, it doesn't work.
Things that need to be done behind the scenes that I can't do.
Yeah, yeah. So look, there's just one thing to wrap up with. The AHIA, which stands for the Australian Hairdressing Industry Awards. I know, and I know this because when we were last on the phone talking, you were being in real time.
Being very rude and watching.
Yeah, well, no. Yeah, it was announced that all the finalists in the awards, and you entered 6 different categories, and you're a finalist in 6 out of 6 categories. So congratulations on that. I know those results don't come out until October. This podcast will go live before then. But good luck with all of that. You certainly have put in, the work, not just with this new salon, because nothing happens overnight as a one-off event. It takes years to get to the point you're at. So, congratulations on that. And I hope that things go well for you there. Whereabouts can people, I've already mentioned the blog, and I'm going to post the pictures of the salon in our blog on Grow My Salon Business website, etc. But whereabouts can people connect with you on Instagram or other social media channels? And if you let us know that, then I can put those links on the show notes, etc. as well for the podcast.
Sure. So our handle for both Instagram and Facebook is just Luke Reynolds, at Luke Reynolds Hairdressing. My email is luke@lukereynolds.com.au. My socials is Luke C. Reynolds on Instagram. It was actually really lovely. I had quite a few people reach out after the last podcast, and I've actually caught up with one really lovely lady who lives locally here and had a coffee with her and had discussions with her. But yeah, I got some really lovely messages of support from that last one. So thank you for that. And thank you, Anthony, for everything you've done for me over the last 12 months. It's been
that's
wonderful having you by my side to get to this point. So.
Thank you. That's been a pleasure. It's been, really interesting journey for me watching you sort of evolve through this process and keep going from strength to strength. So, good luck with all that going forward. So, look, if you're listening to this podcast with Luke and have enjoyed it, do me a favor, share it with people who you know will also enjoy it. And don't forget to subscribe and leave us a rating and review on the Apple Podcast app. So, to wrap up, Luke, thank you once again for being a guest on the Grow My Salon Business podcast. It's been a real pleasure.
My pleasure, Anthony. Thank you for having me.